Hello there and welcome. Today we'll be diving into my growing fascination with the world of extended reality, or XR, and how it's transforming the art world as we know it. What happens when art and technology collide? How does this change the way we experience art? And what does the future of art look like in a world where reality is extended? We'll explore all of this and more. In researching these topics, and going further by creating projects in VR, I found that there are significant gaps in my knowledge and the general literature. I first started by looking at the question, are games art? I found the widest gap maybe and all of that, but that could be because games are expressed in some other more normal way, like through blogs or by separate published books of their art that showcase all of those behind the scenes efforts that go into games. Or I'm just a terrible researcher and games are more of a verb than a noun. And that being said, I tried to shoot for the moon and I found it wasn't made of cheese. So if you follow along with me, I'll show you what I found. It's not to say that XR experiences are all games, but they do intersect in the tools, methods of understanding, and the idea of creating agency. And that agency that games are built upon is debated as art. As author Tai-C Nguyen defends in their book, Games, Agency is Art, Thinking Art, the book also discusses various types of games such as striving games, moral games, political games, etc., and how they relate to our agency and how that creates a transformative artistic experience worthy of being called art. Well, growing up with games, I can't really disagree with him, and the stories being told within games and my choices, they'll live with me forever, I'm sure. However, opponents like the famous movie critic Robert Ebert argued, however, that games are not art. In an article in 2010, he said, and I quote, "Art is not interactive. Anything which requires player input forfeits the creator's control over their work, which is in opposition to the nature of the art. Art is meant to showcase the artist's skills and not the player's." Another person who said something similar is Jonathan Jones, an art critic for The Guardian. He wrote an article in 2012 where he said, "Art does not come with a remote control. As soon as you are using buttons to influence what you see, you have lost most of what art can do for you." Still, I can't say I agree with them, for I think that my strokes of white paint on a canvas with a brush is still the same to me as creating a new save on a video game with some other controller input. That doesn't not make it art, but you can form your own opinion. So if games agency could be art, I guess that means that how we view art can be just as much affected by how we interact with it, or all the controls we use. Just something to think about. Now, I'm going to go take a little bit of a side rant, and that's because whenever I talk about XR, a lot of people associate this advancement of technology with other parallel technologies that are going on, and it kind of pisses me off. So to clear it up before I go any further, this video isn't talking about AI art, that algorithmically created digital media and blockchain non-fungible tokens, or the metaverse. And while I admit that blockchain is interesting and the metaverse is a pipe dream, I don't think people are debating that right now as own art. There is, of course, a debate around AI, which has been described as a digital paintbrush by another artist, Rifiek Adal, who uses similar tools to showcase what he describes as art, which was commissioned by the World Economic Forum recently and exhibited at the Davos Center for his Artificial Realities Choral series. And while there's a debate there that continues, we're not talking about any of that. I just want to make it clear that without blockchain, without AI, without the metaverse, XR is still transformative on its own. Alright, I got a little bit of that out of my system. So back to it. How does XR transform the way we experience art? Isn't it just digital art? Well, in my search to connect the dots, I discovered that the switch to digital art didn't just happen overnight. It happened a lot between the 60s and the 80s, and it's still semi-debated today, but not as widely. As Christopher Kant and a friend of the channel pointed out in his blog post, "Is digital art real art or is it cheating?" He says, the digital art simplifies or removes the non-creative parts of making art, mixing together the right colors, fixing errors and waiting for paint to dry, etc. It keeps the creative parts of making art intact, things like designing the composition, constructing the perfect perspective and forms, and rendering convincing light and shadow. This means that digital art is very much real art and is not cheating. I tend to agree with him. Now, you can find more information from him on selfemployedartist.com. I know my fellow Americans, he spells colors couleurs, but sometimes the British get it right. Now, I tried to find sources that rebutted this, where people said digital art isn't real art, but all I could find was everybody agreeing that digital art isn't traditional physical art. Now, there were a lot of people that didn't like that, but like here on artistryfound.com, where the article Hot Debate Is Digital Art Real Art, written by Brian Mullick, I'm not probably saying that at all right, a well thought out and extensive article that explains that it could be argued that digital art is cheating because it allows artists to copy and paste and undo mistakes. Don't know if they realize that you can do that with like traditional painting and use filters and effects, but ultimately everybody seems to agree that the skills are similar and that shouldn't be a problem. We can all call it art. Like how a stonemason and a painter may make kind of like a bust or a portrait of a person using different tools, but they're still considered artists. So if the tools don't matter, what does? Alright, now to bring this all back. Remember, XR stands for Extended Reality, which is an umbrella term which covers immersive technologies such as virtual reality VR, augmented reality AR, and mixed reality MR. While looking, I found that XR art is a form of artistic expression that uses game-like technologies, or tools if you will, to create immersive interactive experiences often for an audience. Not just digital art, because it involves physical elements that give rise to that feeling of presence and immersion. What I'm talking about is looking at a statue you can't touch in a museum is very close, if not indistinguishable, from looking at a statue you can't touch in VR. This mixing of some physical notions with digital notions is what is challenging our current perception of reality. To review, XR art is exciting and transformative. You'll hear that over and over and over, and it's because it's true. By creating these immersive interactive experiences that challenges our perceptions of reality, XR art offers all sorts of new dimensions that we can use to communicate, evoke emotion, and explore new ideas. While some may argue that digital art, video games, are not real art, the truth is that art is constantly evolving, and XR art is no exception. By blending the physical and digital worlds and breaking down the barriers of distance, time, language, and just placing you in somebody else's shoes, you can really feel like you are there. As the technology behind all of this continues to evolve, so will too the artistic opportunity. I hope that you watching this will be inspired to maybe make a few or invest in a few yourself.